Fulbright roving scholar in American Studies illuminated my imagination as a young social studies teacher in Wyoming. 30 years later, my wife Marcia and I were on top of the world. Rove with us now as we guide you from mile-long roadsides of Sami country to Norwegian classrooms in villages coast to coast. Fulbrighter comes with a little celebrity, a published lesson, school websites, and a local reporter who once wrote that I had called a popular national athlete an asshole. The claim was actually made by a secondary student, and I was told it more accurately translated as shithead, but no harm, as I later learned his reference was offered with affection and good humor. At the Oslo induction ceremony, my late parents were dancing in heaven as their son stood before a foreign minister of education and American ambassador in the same room where the Nobel Peace Prize is announced. The selection committee deliberates at this round table where our friend Marcy sits. Immersion defines Fulbright. Here you see our small flat converted to a situation room, revealing over 50,000 kilometers worth of planes, trains, boats, buses, and dog sleds, over 60 homes away from home, and dozens of school visits, from grade school to graduate school, in parts of the country native Norwegians seldom see. Lest you think I'm lamenting the 80-hour work week of a rover, bear in mind that planning time could be accompanied by a stroll through Oslo's famous Vigeland Park, sporting 80 acres of bronze and granite sculpture, inspiring ruminations on the depths of human experience. Norway would not be complete without a lutefisk encounter. Chef Ole describes soaking cod for weeks in perfectly calibrated lye, before teaming with mashed peas, bacon grease gravy, and high-potency akvavit that has circled the globe twice in oak barrels in anticipation of this seasonal repast. I facilitated hundreds of workshops, ranging from cowboy codes to the tapestry of American roots music, from the myth of Obama to sports as a stage for social change and national identity. During upper secondary school seminars on free expression amongst American students, I discovered patriotic passion for Norway's social democratic system. Norwegian citizenship resides within a frame of assumptions about consensus building. Through many after-class encounters, from second graders to college students, Scandinavian contrast helped me understand America's hazardous freedoms and disputatious identity, where we even argue about the frames of democracy themselves. Fulbright provides front-row seats to amazing opportunities for creative and scholarly exchange. During this visit to a private library in Bergen, an exploration of ancient wisdom in 16th century texts in a 19th century cathedral school from a 21st century vantage point adds perspective to one's life. Imagine exploring a museum in Kristiansand devoted to World War II resistance and running into a 90-year-old man who, as a little boy, had been tortured in front of his prisoner of war father during the Nazi occupation of Norway in 1944. The gruesome scene for which he was a living model is exhibited in a life-size diorama in that very museum. We were also witnesses to cultural epiphanies, including an episode with each of Norway's giants of the humanities, Edvard Munch's Scream, Edvard Grieg's Peer Gynt, and Henrik Ibsen's A Doll's House, where I never dreamed I could be so engaged while drowning in 3 hours of Old Norse vocabulary. In between site visits, we were arrested by Norway's breathtaking beauty. Picture yourself hiking a nearby mountain and spotting the school in the coastal town of Ulesund that will host you the next day. On the right, imagine this view from the window of your classroom in that same school. Roving is an experience in contrasts. Here I don Yak Trax shoe studs, without which I would never have ascended the icy sidewalk to reach the King's School in Tromsø. On the right, I contemplate the week ahead, where I will teach at a Norwegian enclave on Spain's Mediterranean coast. Even more striking is the contrast between 24 hours of December darkness during our week on the island of Svalbard near the North Pole and a stint in Hammerfest, the northernmost town in the world, which, despite also residing in the Arctic Circle, was bathed in 24 hours of sunlight only 5 months later. Please indulge a few scenes just for their own sake. A classic 13th century Stava church in Bygdøy, a beautiful mirror image on the Vesterålen Peninsula, a solo paddle boat on the Oslofjorden, a mile-deep fjord near Stavanger, and a view from the harbor of the iconic commercial district known as the Brygge of Bergen. Another contrast is between wild and domestic. Roe are eggs from wild cod plated for New Year's dinner, wild reindeer tamed for tourists to touch, and wild polar bears stuffed and converted into winter wear in Longyearbyen. Norwegian tradition embraces everything outdoors and doesn't waste a thing. Learning from new friends and colleagues is one of the joys of international exchange. Our host family dares us to experience Nordic skiing and later unveils a foot of dried cod, while university colleagues in Trondheim invite us into their home to remember Thanksgiving with their rendition of pumpkin soup. September Mai means native costumes, just for the joy of wearing, except for the Sami principal in Kautokeino, who wears her native garb to school every day. Look closely and you'll see the king and queen's approving gaze as they wave from the balcony at the children below during the 5-hour Independence Day parade. Or imagine stopping at the neighborhood market on your way home from a roving trip, and while pretending to read a reindeer label, embarrassed by your suitcase, and catching a glimpse of Norway's National Minister of Foreign Affairs, the equivalent of Mike Pompeo or Hillary Clinton, picking up groceries on his way home from work without a single security detail. That captures Fulbright Norway: exhaustion from roving, abiding respect for your host nation, jaw-dropping beauty, and a heartfelt goodbye to our last trio of students. Tusen takk, 1,000 thanks for roving with us today during our vicarious Fulbright tour, or as one author mused, in Cod we trust.